And Mr. Chairman, you were just saying a moment ago that we could clear all of this up this week if you were to review the documents. Are you telling us you have yet to see the documents that you've requested from the Department of Justice, which gives you a timeline into how this investigation into the Trump campaign started?
That is correct. So last August, we issued a subpoena. We should have been provided all of this information that we've been asking for over and over and over again. We issued a new subpoena. And so now we've been waiting. We've attended 2 briefings. They were very small briefings, not a lot of information, but we were happy it was progress. We believe that there are some documents, information that we will review this week. What I would say is if you don't have anything to hide, the Deputy Attorney General knows that Mr. Gowdy would love to exonerate the Department of Justice and the FBI. So just provide us all the documents, everything that we're asking for. Let us comb all the way through it. And we'll issue a letter on Friday, and we'll be done with this. And we'll be able to say, look, the Department of Justice and FBI did nothing wrong. There was no FISA abuse that occurred here. There was no issue of opening a counterintelligence investigation into a campaign. There was no issue with looking at how that investigation was opened. If there was any Five Eyes intelligence that was actually used to open this investigation, we'd like to see it because we have yet to see it. Those are all outstanding questions, not to mention the questionable timeline of the briefings that we have had where we know that the counterintelligence investigation was opened in late July. Well, that's fine. So if that's all the information you have, then why are there these other strange activities leading up to late July, particularly in the spring?
I was trying to understand this because you broke the news on this program more than a month ago that you've looked for reasons and catalysts to understand how an investigation was opened and launched into the Trump campaign. And you said to us, based on the Five Eyes intelligence of all of our partners across the world, that there was no intelligence that you could find that was launched that investigation. And yet here you have your colleague, Trey Gowdy, saying the FBI did the right thing. So I'm trying to understand where the disconnect is.
Well, I think on what Trey Gowdy's saying, and we got to be very careful because the media's tried to make a bigger deal about this than what it is. What Trey Gowdy's specifically talking about is this small slice of the investigation that we're looking at as it relates to whether or not an informant or informants were used. That's what he's referring to when he talks about that the president's not a target of this investigation. I believe that Mr. Gowdy knows very well, and he's been instrumental in helping us get to the bottom of the FISA abuse that did occur. That is absolutely for sure.
Right. The dossier was unverified, and that was used to get a FISA warrant.
Yes, and there's new information actually this week that the media is ignoring. So the New York Times has reported in the past that the Australian Ambassador, Australian High Commissioner, is the one that brought this to the attention of the United States government. Now, typically that would have gone through FBI channels. It would have went through the embassy in London, and it would have came across officially.
And it didn't.
Across the pond officially. And it didn't, and that's what we would like to have seen. Now, this week, we now know that Mr. Downer, the former Australian Ambassador, High Commissioner in London, said that he had given the information to the Australian Ambassador in the U.S. Well, now we know that that's not true. So Mr. Downer now has claimed that in an Australian newspaper, but we now know from sources that have now spoken to different media outlets, the Australians are denying that that's how this happened, that the Australian ambassador in the United States had nothing to do with this. And quite frankly, that's what we want our partners in Australia to do. We don't think that they should be investigating or looking into political campaigns and then willy-nilly throwing that information over to the U.S. government and then opening investigations into political campaigns. That's not what we want to see.
If the president is not a target, why are we talking about a potential interview with the special prosecutor? Back to the letter that Fox News has obtained, and that is basically a letter from the senior legal team outlining the reasons why the president should not sit with Robert Mueller and is not going to be subpoenaed and should not be. So if he's not a target, why did they have to send this letter?
Well, I agree with you, right? So this is the difference. So Mr. Gowdy believes that he's been told by the Department of Justice on several occasions that Mr. Trump's not a target. But what I keep going back to is that, well, wait a second. We know from Mr. Comey, he said that the Trump campaign was the reason that they opened up the counterintelligence investigation. So they did open up an investigation in the Trump campaign. And so, look, maybe I'm not a lawyer. Maybe there's a legal definition as to why he's not part of this. However, I don't think that's the case here. I mean, I just think that it's impossible to believe in normal America, if you open up into the Trump campaign, you absolutely are opening up into Donald Trump himself. That's my opinion. Mr. Gowdy doesn't think so. He's a lawyer. He's worked with DOJ. I don't know who's right, but it's one of the things that we have to get to the bottom of.
You are investigating the State Department right now to try and understand how the information has flowed.